Well, I'm delighted that so many people have come, especially at this difficult time of the academic year with midterm times. I know a lot of people are grading right now. But it's really important to me that you took the opportunity to come here to talk about and learn about engaged learning. The process that we're involved in here with this Provost Forum is to continue our campus conversation about the importance of engaging students in their learning and engaging faculty in their learning and engaging each of those groups in each other's learning. So I'm delighted that you've shown enough interest to come here for this. I welcome our special guest who's taken time out of his busy schedule to come here and do this. The issue of engaged learning is important to us, not just because it's what we're all about here, but also because it's connected to our strategic plan as a college. We've made a deliberate effort to make sure that that language of engagement is in the strategic plan. It's also in the ears of the development people who are here. We talk about our moment now. I don't know if I could say that, but we're engaged in the process of making sure that our students and our faculty have the opportunity to do things that that may have been a little bit difficult before. And of course our new core curriculum, which many of you slaved over for many years. I know that I feel as if I slaved over for many years, gives us the opportunity now to really think about how we can teach and learn in a way where the active learning results in a lifelong learning experience. So I want to thank you for coming. I want to especially thank the Student Engagement Advisory Committee for all their work and Julia for chairing it. And I also need to acknowledge publicly the support of the Davis Educational Foundation for the money that made it possible for us to have a dinner tonight, as well as all the other things. So there's no more important thing to me than improving academic excellence here. And I believe that one of the significant ways in which we can do this is to find ways in which we become engaged in each other's learning. So for that, I'm deeply appreciative. Thank you. Chuck.
I have the privilege tonight of introducing our keynote speaker, Dr. Carl Strikwerda. Dr. Strikwerda has been Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences and Professor of History at the College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia since 2004. As Dean, he developed a faculty-student research initiative, helped create a program in community engagement and scholarship, and helped to win grants from the Freeman, Gates, Hewlett, and Mellon Foundations, as well as the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, and a number of federal agencies. He regularly teaches a course on global history and advises international relations majors. Between 1998 and 2004, he served as an associate dean at the University of Kansas, where he helped create the European Studies program and a Peace and Conflict Studies minor, led study abroad programs to Europe, and won a Kemper Fellowship for Excellence in Teaching. He taught previously at Calvin College, Hope College, SUNY Purchase, and the University of California, Riverside. Dean Strikwerda earned his BA from Calvin College and an MA from the University of Chicago and a PhD from the University of Michigan, all in history. He has published 3 books and numerous articles on European and global history, and has won grants from the German Marshall Fund, the American Philosophical Society, and the National Endowment for the Humanities. He served as a historical consultant for the National World War I Museum, and currently serves as treasurer and member of the board of directors of the Council of College of Arts and Sciences, the nation's largest association of arts and sciences deans. In July, he will become president of Elizabethtown College in Elizabethtown, Pennsylvania. In the area of undergraduate research, Dean Strikwerda has encouraged funding for joint faculty-student awards, whereby both advisor and advisee are funded to work on a research project, initiated improved tracking of undergraduate research, and created such initiatives as a Center for Geospatial Analysis and an Institute for the Theory and Practice of International Relations, where students work on GIS and international data sets as part of faculty-student research projects. On a more personal note, a couple of years ago, 3 of us who are here tonight, Jack Breen, Father Nick, and I went down to a conference in Washington, D.C., which is Career Dialogues from the Council of Undergraduate Research. And we heard Dr. Strikwerda speak to representatives from all across the nation. And while he was speaking, when he was done, we said, we need to get this guy to come to Providence College. He did such a terrific job. We need our faculty to hear him. So after the program, we happened to catch Dr. Strikwerda in the hallway, and we said just that. We'd love to have you come to Providence College. Here we are today, through the support of the Davis Educational Foundation, we're able to do that. And I'm pleased and honored to be able to have Dr. Strikwerda here tonight, to be able to let him share his experience and knowledge as it relates to undergraduate research and student engagement. And I have the pleasure to introduce Dr. Carl Strikwerda. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chuck, and thank you, Provost, Lena, as well, for those remarks. It's a pleasure to be here at a college that in many ways reminds me of my own alma mater, Calvin College, which was also a faith-based institution that had a deep commitment to educating students about the big questions with intense focus on reading and writing and learning about the biggest issues of life, and one that shaped me really for the rest of my life. So it's been interesting to meet some of you today and to find out how you are engaging with your students. In terms of what I'd like to talk about tonight, I'd like to begin with the big picture about liberal education and think about what is the value of a college education in the world we live in today, where there are, as we know, so many kinds of ways for people to learn outside of the college environment in the traditional sense that we encountered it. So you can learn skills on the internet. You have the for-profit market out there that can offer you all kinds of skills. Businesses, some large corporations run enormously successful educational enterprise within their corporations to train people how to learn to do more effective human resources, more effective counting, product management, and all those kinds of things. And where information is ubiquitous. As we know, some of our students hardly use a traditional library anymore to do their research. My son, who's a college student right now, if the computer is down, it's like, oh my God, Dad, how am I going to get a paper done? You know, well, you could open a book. You could go to the library, but the internet is down. What are we going to do? All right, so what is it that a college education at a place like Providence, what is it that we really offer that's in a sense special and deeper than simply doing skills or simply providing information? In other words, how do we educate for what I like to call deep abilities, more than the ability to simply acquire information or to learn new skills? Because other people can teach you those. We can teach those as well, but others can do it, and in some sense that's maybe all they do. So what are the deep abilities that we're trying to reach? And I'd like to think that what we do best is move people through our curriculum towards a level of independence as a learner with the ability to produce some sort of tangible result. So that we're actually making them not simply an active learner, but somebody who can apply, test, and integrate knowledge and actually have an outcome. So in that sense, as I put it, we want to have engaged learning, and that means independence. And I think it's a mentored education. There has to be that value added that they get from working with people like yourselves who've worked longer and harder and more systematically on subjects. But at the same time, there's that independence. We want them to be independent, but we want them also to learn with others, because in fact, that's how ultimately you do learn in this society that we're all moving into. We are all, in any job we do, any of our students going to do, in any corporation or government agency or whatever, they're going to have to learn with others. One of the most important things we can teach our students is that they don't know everything and never will, and the intelligent issue is when do you draw from others and which bodies of knowledge and skills you need to combine. So they're going to work in a corporation or a federal agency or a nonprofit. It's a team that they're going to be part of. And they may be, doing the research on the international side. Somebody else is the person who knows about the engineering. Somebody else knows about the policy issues. Somebody else is the creative writer who's got to put it together. So it's independent, but it's collaborative. And that's one of the keys. Why do we love mentoring? Because it teaches them an important lesson that they have to learn with others. And then that there's a tangible result. There's an outcome. And yes, if you think about it, that's almost a definition, I think, of undergraduate research. Undergraduate research is independent, but it's mentored. It's not the student just going off on his or her own. And there is a result. That result might be a website. It might be a group project. It might be a report. It might be a video. But it is a tangible result. And more deeply again, what's important about this kind of learning is that it's synthetic. That you want to show students that what we have to teach them is the ability to learn all kinds of new things as they try to answer one big question about their research. Samuel Johnson said, "A man will turn over half a library to write a book." And that's in some sense one of the best things we can teach our students through research and inquiry as a way to learn. That you start out with a question: why does this, this chemical get synthesized in this way? Or why do these people have this interpretation of these 18th century plays? And when you push into those areas, it raises questions about related disciplines, about other parts of their own discipline. They have to keep learning and learning and learning to answer what is in some sense, in the beginning, a very specific question. So synthesis is incredibly important in terms of what we're trying to offer. And then integrative, that there's a discovery process that goes on between theory and practice. That what we are trying to do is, and it's an iterative process. It's not simply formulating a hypothesis, finding out a way to answer it, getting the results, writing them up, but it is running into results that don't fit the hypothesis and forcing yourself to rethink the hypothesis, or going back and looking at the literature and realizing you need to do it in a new way, reformulating your question, attacking new evidence, and going back and forth until you get something that makes a comprehensible whole. So it's that interaction, that integrativeness, that's critical to what we want to offer students. That again is very difficult to get with a student simply sitting in front of a computer or simply being given information. They're not going to get these deep abilities. How do we have a culture which encourages this kind of learning? And I borrowed this from people in the sciences, and you have to forgive me, I'm a historian, so I don't think I have the metaphors right quite exactly here. But let's think about it, how we've approached undergraduate research. You're already doing a fair amount of undergraduate research here. William and Mary was when I came here as a dean, when I came there as a dean. But we hadn't really moved, I don't think, to the place where it was the central focus and the ultimate sort of triumph of our kind of learning. So a lot of the undergraduate research that I think is happening here, and certainly a lot that was happening when I came as a dean at William & Mary 7 years ago, was, let's call it a sort of localized level, or what one of my scientist friends calls it sort of the nucleus, or maybe you could call it the cellular or molecular. It was some sort of small unit focus. We had a lot of great individual courses out there that were doing very interesting things, or individual professors who were doing things in a number of different courses. And gradually, if there were enough of those cells or molecules or nuclei, spinning this off, eventually, sometimes it might be influencing the whole organism. And so the organism would be a department or a program, okay, that's been changed in having this kind of education of deep abilities. The problem with that, of course, is one organism, i.e. a department or program, can be wholly absorbed in this and very successful with it, but it's not really influencing the next organism, the next department or the program. And of course, it also is the case that it depends sometimes on a few champions. And one of them retires or leaves or, God forbid, gets promoted to administration. I didn't mean that. They get kicked upstairs to administration. And they're not there in the rank and file. They're not being that spark in that department or program. So as one of my scientist friends points out, what we really need is an ecology of research as a means of education through inquiry. We need an ecological approach. You really need to have the campus culture, the environment of the culture, that if that's the ecology, the environment, promoting and encouraging this kind of education. And if that's the case, and again, I'm not an ecologist, but I'm taking it on faith from him, you want an environment that actually promotes this kind of education, this kind of behavior. So even organisms, departments and programs out there that haven't been influenced by any molecules or cells or nuclei within them, they just realize this is to our advantage. We should do this. This is the way it works here. So they, as it will, evolutionary metaphor here, they adapt and they mutate. The successful mutations are the ones that stick, and departments and programs that didn't have anybody within them doing undergraduate research, education through inquiry, they begin to get it and say, this is the way to live in this environment, is to adopt this, because it makes sense. Students are better educated by it. We find it more fulfilling. We're able to do our research and our teaching in a more integrated way. So let's think about that ecological or holistic approach. So what's an ecological or holistic approach to encouraging a campus culture of education through inquiry? Well, one, I think it does actually begin at the top. And people often say words are cheap, but I don't think that's true. I think just as true as when we say fighting racism begins by people making a statement that is wrong, or holding values depends on people holding up moral values. So I think with something like undergraduate research, we have to say, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to educate our students to be, again, in their terms of their deep abilities. We want them to become independent, creative discoverers of things. And the mission of the institution should say that. And as a dean and our provost and our president, they have said this. This is important. We care about this. And you say it, and you say it, and you say it. It becomes part of that culture. The public relations effort has to do that. So, for example, we have a research magazine at William & Mary. It's called Ideation. Every time we run an article on a faculty member's research, I say it's got to have a student in it. And the editor always puts it in there. Every time we talk about the triumph of a student who just won an award or a prize or got to go to present research at a conference, who's the faculty member who mentored him or her, okay? You always show that dyadic relationship, that it's the faculty research that drives this process, and what the students achieve is because they've been mentored and they live in an environment of research. Practices and policies. Faculty are like everybody else, so my economics department tells me over and over again, they respond to incentives, okay, and they respond to disincentives as well. So it is crucial to look at bylaws, and I've had these kinds of struggles with my departments too. They say we do all this undergraduate research, it's incredibly time intensive, it takes time away from our own research. We could just get it done faster sometimes if I just did it. Maybe it takes time away from teaching and so on, but I'm bringing it together, but quote, I get no credit for it. And my response to them is, give credit for it. Give credit for it. Take your departmental bylaws and write them so that it's not just research, teaching, and service. However you want to do it, you can either make a component of the research and make a component of the teaching evaluation be undergraduate research, or as some of our departments have done, they just sliced off some of those points on their scale from both research and teaching and made a fourth category. People are evaluated on how many undergraduate researchers they have worked on and the quality of what their students have done, and that's what they present when it comes to tenure, and that's what they present when it comes to promotion. So these things are evaluated and they are rewarded in a way. There's other ways to do this too. We've tried to make as many of the awards at the dean's level in arts and sciences at William & Mary be focused on, we have an award, the Murphy Award, sort of the Murphy Fellow is the person who is an exemplar of integration of research into teaching. And we have a number of other term professorships or fellowships we call them, where you get an award that supports your research for the next year, a couple $1,000s. It's on the basis of whether you have integrated your students into research. And again, I'm using research, but research is choreographing a dance. Research is writing a novel. Research is interpreting 18th century British plays. So I mean it in the broad sense of creativity and scholarship as well. Resources. Foundations have been critical to what we've done. When I came to William & Mary, we were not getting nearly the money from foundations that we should have. And so that worked on this with our development office, our corporate foundations director, going to foundations and making the case that we're offering this high level quality of education, and we could be a model for other institutions if you gave us this money. And we've had a fair amount of success with a wide variety of foundations. Private funds are also important. And I'll talk more about that in a minute, but there is this critical issue of how you explain this to private donors most of whom went to college at a time when this was not on the radar screen, and you have to somehow make them understand how important this is and to raise those funds. And then we have one particular addition at William & Mary that perhaps you could explore here if it's economically feasible. We give free housing on campus to any student who's doing research with a faculty member in the summers. We have over 330 students every summer living in the dorms who are doing research with faculty members in all fields. Many are in the sciences, but many are not. And this is actually a very important institutional match for us when we're applying for outside funding as well, to count that as an institutional match. One of the key things we try to focus on is the student-faculty team approach. And this has been where we give funding for a faculty member, and the only way he can get that faculty, that support, is to actually have students working in his or her research. So there's always this team approach, and the students have to be recruited, and there has to be an explanation how they're going to be used in that research and carry that forward. And that's how the faculty member gets that funding. So as much as possible, institutional research funding to support undergraduate research as the focus. Poor, you can look at this on our website at the Charles Center. The Charles Center is an endowed center at William & Mary that runs our honors program, runs our prestigious scholarships, runs all kinds of things. But they have something called Progress of Undergraduate Research. And you can get on that website and see students blogging about and posting about what their research has been as an undergraduate. And other undergraduates go there to find out what research projects are really cool to work on. And faculty can go on there and see what what students are interested in pursuing the projects. And it's really been a kind of clearinghouse to get people interested in undergraduate research and see how, and they even have solved some research questions there. One student was blogging and said, I'm doing this for Professor X, I can't figure this out, he's not quite sure where I should go. And a faculty member looked at it and said, she said, I got a solution to that problem. And she actually emailed the student and said, come over to my lab, I can explain it to you. Fundraising. Fundraising is, it is a new frontier in terms of undergraduate research. And I can give you a couple of pointers on what's been reasonably successful for us. One is demonstrating a track record, actually documenting what you're doing, no matter how small it was in the beginning. Still say that you have find these stories of students who were shaped by the undergraduate research they did and were made more competitive for medical school or graduate school and so forth. And that's actually critical to document it to donors. I think it's also important, as I said, to work with donors' prior experiences. Because if you're dealing with people, who has wealth, right? They tend to be people of an older generation for the most part. And most of them, when they went to college, they had lectures, they might have had seminars, but undergraduate research is not something in their knowledge. So you build on what they know. And in many cases, what you find are donors whose experience in study abroad, or internship, or a summer job even on campus, or working in an office on campus, some sort of experience, and a couple times with a donor, one donor, I simply talked to him about how he succeeded in his career. Because none of this seemed to work. And he said, well, this corporation hired me. It was amazing. They sent me back to school. Here I thought I was going to get on the job, and they made me, follow this guy and follow that guy. And, looking back, that was the best thing for me. And I said, that's what we're doing with our students. You didn't get that in college, but we can give our students that. What that corporation give you is that hands-on experience. And somehow that seems to click, that language. Make donors understand that what we're giving them is hands-on experience working with a faculty member. Over and over again, that seems to be the one thing that clicks where they say, yeah, I can get that, okay? It's the bridge between the theoretical and the practical, or the head knowledge and the hand knowledge, as one person put it. And then I think it's also important, stewardship is incredibly important. So I had a donor from New York who gave us some money for student-faculty research. The director of our Charles Center, Joel Schwartz, made darn sure the first student who got that scholarship was from New York. And we could connect him back to that donor. We had a donor who gave us money. He's very interested in East Asia, does a lot of work in East Asia. We made darn sure that the first student was working in East Asia, okay? And this guy has a lot of interest in China, knows some Chinese. We made sure the first student was working in that area. So stewardship for these people is very important. And the first students are often critical in terms of building those relationships with those donors. I could talk a little bit about some innovative projects, just to give you some examples of some of the things we've done. The Madrid Memory Project. Some of you may remember 2004, the horrible bombing in that summer in Spain, where the Madrid subways were bombed, 191 people were killed. It's sometimes called Spain's 9/11. It was the biggest single act of terrorism done by Al-Qaeda or Al-Qaeda-related group outside of the United States. And we have a faculty member who works on Spain. Her own area of research is actually more on the Spanish Civil War, but she is very interested in the politics of memory. How history books record the past, how poems, movies, TV shows, and so on record the past, how archives are created to actually, like museums, what I worked on with World War I, that shapes people's knowledge of the past. She got in touch with people in Spain, did a little work, and brought her students over to Spain. Their project for the summer, because she found out the Spanish were having difficulty knowing how to handle this, her students worked that summer on collecting all the memorabilia left by Spanish people at the site of those bombings. So they collected, photos, little books, handwritten notes, all kinds of things like that, and then archiving these things and recording them and helping, create first of all, a digital archive that displays this and so on. For this, they were actually honored by the Spanish government. And it's a kind of project, and our Hispanic Studies faculty have been the real pioneers on this, using study abroad as an undergraduate research experience. So my friend Francie, who created that project, she thought about how to create the project before she ever went, recruited the students for it by saying, you will work on the Madrid Memory Project. Here's what you're going to work on. Each of you will be doing a piece of the research. We will meet in the spring, a one-credit class, and begin work on this. So the students read the literature on the politics of memory, on 20th century Spain and all this sort of stuff. They each had a piece of the research project before they went. So what they did there was true, a great study abroad program. They improved their Spanish, but they were doing the research while they were there too on this. They came back, finished their papers, or in some cases a website or a video, and they put it all together and contributed to that Madrid Memory Project. So again, I think study abroad and undergraduate research is a real natural. It's a way to make study abroad a much more intense learning experience. The Maggie Walker House. Maggie Walker was not just the first African-American to head a bank in the United States. She was the first African-American woman to head a bank, and I think she was the first woman to head a bank in the United States. She was active in Richmond, Virginia at the end of the 19th century, almost forgotten, but her house is still there. So one of our faculty members realized her house was still there in Richmond. It had been totally neglected, and her own research was partly involved in how do we get, how do we save this history before it's lost. She organized several courses over several semesters on the question how to get National Historic Landmark status for the Maggie Walker House. And so over several semesters, students have worked on this project, from everything to just researching the history of the house, what archival evidence was out there, how you get National Historic Landmark status, looking up the laws, talking about the federal government, the local government, talking to attorneys, talking to the National Park Service, looking at other National Historic Landmark houses and sites, and which ones have worked and not, because some they've given them the status and nobody comes, or they've not been very successful. So what works and doesn't work. So again, a project where by working on one tangible result, they actually can learn an enormous amount about, because really the theme here was public history. And it was also, you might say, it was also a case of civic engagement and service learning, because the city of Richmond and the community of Richmond has been extremely grateful to our students for contributing this huge amount of material to this project. The applied psychological research. One of our psychologists realized a lot of our students go off to be social workers, or they work in all kinds of other of the helping professions and so forth, and they are trained deeply in terms of research, in the sense of the literature of the research, or they're trained in the research in terms of, whatever it is, survey data or participant observers, or, all kinds of experimental psychology research. But then they get out there in society and they have to work for a social worker or a human resources department, and they can't make that connection. So she has this fantastic course called Applied Psychological Research the structure of the course, and again, like a lot of these courses, there's almost more work happens before than in the course. But she's found agencies that have real world problems, that something isn't working. They're having problems with adoptions, they're having problems with whatever the case may be, drug abuse, all these kinds of things. The whole course is structured around the students doing the research and crystallizing it into a real tight sort of, can easily to use document for that agency. And the agency is the vendor. They can say, it doesn't work for us. It's too theoretical, too pedantic, or it doesn't answer our problem. We tried that doesn't work. Give us some new research. So students realize, this whole interaction between research and the people who need it out there, the end users, it makes you reread more research, but then you have to find out how to summarize it and tightly express it. And then the other one, finally, the Program on International Peace and Security, or the PIPS program. This is a program where we find federal agencies that have, again, needs for actual research and assign our students to do it. And the students are doing more research on, U.S. policy on Iran, multinational corporations in Indonesia, whatever the case may be. And again, working in teams, producing documents that these federal agencies can use. And I think about 20 of our students have found jobs now in the federal sector or corporations working with the federal government on the basis of the kinds of projects that they've worked here. Criticisms and challenges. But is it really research? Okay, I hear this a lot from my physicist friends, and we have an applied science department and so on. A number of people say, research is the work that we do as scholars, scientists, or artists that produces something truly new. Okay, that's true scholarship or creativity, or if you will, research. What these undergraduates are doing benefits them enormously, perhaps, but it's not research. Okay, it's not really, with a few cases, you could say, well, we've co-authored an article in a biological journal, and there's 2 undergraduate authors there with, a couple faculty members, I and my colleague at another university. Maybe that's, their role was research, possibly, but the rest of this, it isn't really research. It's a legitimate question, and I understand that there's going to be lots of different definitions of research and so on, but I would emphasize that if you think about faculty research, how broadly we interpret it, that again, I have to decide on whether or not to give tenure to people who direct ensembles, to people who are experimental, high-energy physicists, to people who interpret Shakespeare, all kinds of things. We find ways. I have a person who has tenure. His field is lighting design, okay, in theater, so it's rather different than a lot of other fields. We find ways in the end as faculty to consider it all research, broadly speaking, what's peer-reviewed in this field. I think we could be at least as ecumenical, if you will, with our students. At the very least, I believe these are research experiences. These are research experiences for our students. They are as important in their own way as the research that most of us did in graduate school on the way to becoming fully fledged scientists or scholars or artists. So I think in some ways I realize this is a serious question, but I think I would still use the word research here. It's participating in the research enterprise writ broad. Some people have bigger roles to play, some have lesser, but it is still, I would say, research. I think one of the real challenges we face as well is particularly in the humanities, with what my scientist friends would say the single investigator or the single principal investigator model. In the humanities, particularly, the idea is you write your monograph, okay? So you are the expert on, early French novels in the 1820s in this, this kind of tradition. Or you do political theorists who reacted to Hobbes or something like that. And it's extremely difficult to think about how an undergraduate can participate in that kind of research. In the cases of foreign languages, how many undergraduates are going to read Arabic or Chinese well enough, even after 4 years, that they could do something serious in research? This is, again, I think, an important challenge. Certain disciplines lend themselves less well to the team approach, to the approach where undergraduates are doing a small piece of a larger enterprise. I think there are ways to actually confront it and begin to move beyond it. I think, for one thing, if we look at a few of the successes we've had at the institutional level, what I've called institutional support for ongoing research projects, I think we can have a couple of keys here about how to meet this challenge. I'll give you two examples here. Global Film Festival. We created a Global Film Festival, and a faculty member runs the whole thing essentially as an undergraduate research experience. So he begins to work with students on what should we do a Global Film Festival on, what hasn't been done, what's a cutting edge issue. So whether it's music in global films, whether it is historical films, or any kind of Asian films that have been influenced by French New Wave. I mean, anything you want, and then research that topic, and then research who are the good directors and why are they interesting, and then also researching how you do a film festival. That's a very important part of this course. What film festivals have worked well? What are the economics of a film festival? How do you publicize a film festival? How do you do your audience research and all that? So the students in creating the film festival are learning about all kinds of things about the film industry, about film criticism, film history, and audience theory and so forth in the process of doing this film festival. ADATA. ADATA began as an undergraduate honors thesis in government, and a student was doing the impact of environmental aid on the developing countries and whether or not environmental projects were successful or not. And he kept coming back to his faculty members and saying, the data out there on international development aid is really not very good. And his faculty members said, look, every researcher in the world uses the OECD data. Okay, it's the only data out there. Everybody uses it. You can look at any political science dissertation in the world, all the journals, they all, basically shut up and go back and do your honors thesis. The kid kept coming back again. I'm telling you, the data's not very good. I've looked at it, okay? There's just no sense to some of this stuff. It must be miscoded. Why would Botswana one year have environmental aid that's planting trees, and the next year they've got environmental aid that's clear-cutting forests? It doesn't make any sense, okay? So finally, at the honors thesis, he actually convinced them that the data wasn't very good, and they said, the kid's right. This data is kind of messy. And so, to make a long story short, about $5 million later, we are building the world's largest database on international development aid, thanks to money from the Gates Foundation, Hewlett Foundation, a lot of other people. It began with an undergraduate research project. It has depended on, I think, over 100 undergraduate researchers working. We give them minimum wage pizza, and they're robo-coders, as we say. We double-blind code everything, and it's just been an extraordinary project. But the point is, the institution, we've invested some money in it, and more importantly, external funders. It's a little bit of a grand example, but the point is, we've invested in some infrastructural things that have allowed lots of faculty, more than one faculty member, to keep this up, and lots of students who can keep moving this project along. And I think it's important as well that you work on curricular change to get institutional change. The best way to get undergraduate research embedded in a culture at some point is to have departments and programs actually make it a part of the major. And if you think about it, during the summer you have to almost pay students to do research. If they're doing it during the school year, students are paying us, okay? Because it's part of their major, it's part of their curriculum. So there's a way, I think, then to really move this forward in a way that's really natural for the campus. Conclusions: think holistically. Think about the whole campus culture, the ecology of it, what you want to achieve. Think laterally. It's a relationship between the research office and departments, between the honors program or the development office raising money from private donors and foundations. Build models. We have a few really successful models, and we brought them to other departments, and I understand you're doing this in your campus already. Get those examples, those models, and show them elsewhere. Tell the stories. Over and over again, I mean, the ADATA story has passed almost into mythology at William & Mary about how it was an undergraduate honors thesis that led to $2.5 million Gates grant, and so forth. But you just keep telling those stories. They work with donors, they work with foundations, they work with other people on campus. We even got our president telling the A-Data story, okay? It's out there, and it does tend to win an audience. And then remember that everything we teach was once someone's research. So teaching and the act of discovery, of reinterpretation or new knowledge is integral to what we do as teachers. Thank you very much.
Thank you again, Dr. Strikwerda, for your terrific presentation. We are going to take about 5 minutes to get set up for our panelists and to clear the tables of the food, the plates in front of you. And so restrooms are right down the hall. And so give us about 5 minutes and we'll begin the program again. Thank you again. Program. One of the things that we've talked about in planning this event is it's great to have a keynote speaker come in like Dr. Strikwerda to tell us about what's happening elsewhere at his institution and elsewhere as it relates to undergraduate research. We also thought it would be helpful to have a panel of PC faculty talk a little bit about undergraduate research from their perspectives. And so we have 3 of our faculty here today from different academic disciplines. Professor Nick Longo from the Department of Public and Community Service Studies and also the Global Studies program. Dr. Margaret Manchester from the Department of History, used to be involved a lot more with the American Studies program. And also Father Nick Austriaco from the Department of Biology and also affiliated with the Department of Theology. And so we've asked each of them to provide brief overview, brief perspective in response to Dr. Strikwerda's talk. And then we're going to open that up to audience discussion. Dr. Strikwerda may have some response himself regarding these comments. We also have some students here tonight, and we'd love to hear from those of you who are students with regard to your own experiences in undergraduate research. So we will begin with Nick Longo, and please enjoy dessert as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Chuck. And thank you to Dr. Strikwerda for a fabulous talk that's to begin this conversation. Let me start by saying I've learned that there's an inverse relationship between the amount of time I have to talk about something and the amount of time I have to put into preparing for something. So when Chuck said I had 7 minutes to respond to the talk, I knew I had to bring notes with me. So let me start by saying that I think at the core of this talk is really an invitation to rethink the broader research agenda of the university. And I think this is in some ways a response to that criticism of, is this really research? And to recognize that student engagement is essential to undergraduate research is to recognize that research, to quote Parker Palmer, is not a bloodless abstraction. Research is not an isolated, detached activity. Research, when connected with student and community engagement, can be engaged, participatory, collaborative, and relevant to real-world problems, which we saw in a lot of the examples that he provided, and I think some of the examples we're going to talk about from the panel today. An engaged approach isn't only about research, it's also about how we think about our teaching. Barr and Tagg have articulated this important shift in the mid-90s in terms of the teaching mission of the university. And they talked about moving from an instructional model to a learner-centered paradigm. And here's what they say. They said, the learning-centered approach to the college's purpose serves not to transfer knowledge, but to create environments and experiences that bring students to discover and construct knowledge for themselves. Taken together, this rethinking of the research and teaching mission indicates the importance of students co-creating an engaged university. The importance of students, not seeing our students as passive receptacles or consumers of their education, but as co-creators and owners of their education. I realize this goes a bit against the grain of how many in higher ed think about the current generation of students. And I have one quote here from a higher ed leader who levels a fairly typical complaint against students. And he says, "By far, the most disturbing stories I've picked up on campus these past 2 years have been the ones of student disengagement. These aren't the complaints we've heard for years about student under-preparation, though that's still real. They're the stories about a generation described to me as consumerist, uncivil, demanding, preoccupied with work, and caring more for GPAs and degrees than the life of the mind." Clearly, this higher ed leader has never been to Providence College and met our students. Yet while there's certainly elements of truth in this critique of our current generation of students, I think it's probably less a critique of this generation than a broader societal and cultural critique. And I wanted to just give you one example of how we're thinking of seeing students as co-creators in the Global Studies program, to give you one example of one organism, to use Dr. Strikwerda's analogy, and to give you an example also of how we thought thinking about revisiting and revising our curriculum to make undergraduate research central. So many of you know that the Global Studies program was started in 2005. Margaret was actually one of the leaders who helped to get the program started on campus. We started with the requirement that students do an introductory course. There was an advanced language requirement. Then students had to have an international experience, become fluent in a foreign language, and then there was a year-long capstone course, which was the requirement. We've just graduated our first 2 classes. After graduating our first 2 classes of the program, we realized that students didn't have enough preparation for their year-long capstone to do really intense research, the kind of research we wanted to see them undertaking. So we added in, before their study abroad experience, we added a research methods course. So now they take a case studies in global studies, which allows them to get the foundation for research. But another thing is we worked with Adrienne Boulier, our dean in the Center for International Studies, and we built a series of international partners and programs that are recognized programs for global studies. And all of these programs have some kind of an engaged research component. So when students are studying abroad, which is required for global studies, they have to do either an internship, some kind of action research component while they're abroad, or they have to have some kind of engaged service learning component. So the combination of taking a research methods course before they go and being fluent in a foreign language, and then having an international experience that has an engagement component, allows now our senior course to be a really fully engaged research process where students are really co-creators of their learning. I want to just end with one example of what this looks like in practice. So one of our current seniors, and this is, I think, in some ways where we want to get to with all of our students, is a student named Sonia Penso. Sonia is a global studies major who studied abroad for the year, her junior year, and she studied for the fall semester in Nicaragua, the spring semester in Argentina. In both places, she did a SIT study abroad program, so she was required to do some kind of intensive undergraduate research. And in both places, what she did was she had an interest before she went, because she worked with the Institute for the Study and Practice of Nonviolence, worked as a jobs coach over the summer. So she had an interest in youth violence. And in both Nicaragua and Argentina, she worked with NGOs that were working with youth, working to alleviate youth violence, and did interviews with both youth and police officers. And now, as part of her senior thesis, which is Perceptions and Misperceptions of Youth Violence, she's doing a comparative study between Nicaragua, Argentina, and Providence, Rhode Island, and she's doing interviews with youth and police officers in Providence. And this is some ways where you really can integrate the study abroad experience into undergraduate research. And I want to just see, this is how she's thinking about her work. She said, in revealing the perceptions and misperceptions the youth and police have of one another, I hope to provide suggestions of how to deter youth violence, provide youth justice, and reintegrate marginalized youth back in society while providing them resources and access to opportunities. So this is truly someone, to use Dr. Strikwerda's presentation, someone who can apply, test, and integrate learning. So thanks, I'll pass it to Margaret now.
Hi. Much like the Global Studies program, where you have this curriculum reform, we found some of the same issues in history. And even before I became chair, there was already a movement afoot within our department to provide our students with the skills that they need in order to do better research and to communicate their research ideas more effectively and clearly. And so one of the things that happened was that we developed a new course called History 100, Thinking and Writing About History, in which students do a little bit of philosophy of history. They look at historiography, the different ways in which historians have interpreted the past, but they also do hands-on evaluation of primary sources, looking at secondary source arguments and how they're constructed. They do critical film reviews, critical book reviews, they do research and literature reviews, and then they do a research project, a short research project. And the whole purpose of this course as a gateway course, if you're going to integrate research and you're going to place greater prominence on research, you must provide your students not just with the tools, but also the opportunities to practice the skills that they're developing so that they can get more adept at doing the research and communicating those ideas effectively. We also made a seminar a requirement rather than just advised for our majors. Within our department, since I've been chair, there's been a real emphasis on promoting a greater awareness and appreciation of research within the department. So for example, our department, as Dr. Strikwerda recommended, revised its tenure and promotion guidelines to emphasize scholarship. Also, when faculty come back from sabbatical, we expect those people to present their research, the fruits of their work, to the department and to our students. And I actually recommended to Dean Adamus Leota that anybody who gets money and support from the institution for a sabbatical should be required to make some kind of a public presentation of their research to kind of encourage that conversation about research on a campus-wide level. We also, for our seniors, revised our senior thesis and upgraded the guidelines, clarified the guidelines, and that kind of built in with our co-curricular planning. So this past year was our inaugural year for a new lecture series. We're very grateful to the Davis Foundation for a grant that we received, and we had a faculty committee that set up a quote-unquote Making History a Faculty-Student lecture series. And in the fall semester, we had 4 faculty presenters, some of whom went up for promotion in December, but some of whom were presenting on research that they were currently working on. And for those first 4 presentations, we had more than 500 students who attended the 4 presentations. There was a lot of excitement, a lot of buzz, and it really fostered within our department and among our majors a real sense that we're not just scholars, we're not just teachers, but we're actively engaged in this research pursuit, and we are excited and passionate about sharing it with our students. And we've also planned a new event called Life Beyond PC, where we've invited history majors, rising juniors and seniors. It's just an information session where we have the graduate director, John Scanlon, the legal advisor. We have somebody from Student and Career Services, a former alum who is currently in graduate school, and we talk about the importance for those students who are interested in graduate studies, the importance of doing research, particularly the senior thesis, as a great writing sample, but also to train them in the habits and the discipline of research, which is so essential for graduate work. Our advising is also a key component. So this semester, for example, to excite more students about the possibility of doing a senior thesis, one of my colleagues contacted personally every junior who had a 3.5 average or higher and spoke to them individually about doing a senior thesis, exploring interests and potential topics or research areas, directing them to colleagues who do research in those areas. And so out of the 18, we hope to have about 10 senior thesis seniors doing theses in the fall semester. So we're very excited about that. The area where the history department probably needs the most work is in the area of collaborative faculty-student research projects. And I'm really hoping that we can get some ideas and suggestions on better ways. We still very much follow the model that was presented of the monograph within our discipline. But I know that in other departments there are more collaborative research projects that are going forward. And my one hope is that we're working on developing a public history course with a public history internship as a component to go with it. And this might be our entree within the department for developing more of those collaborative research initiatives. But we're really excited about what's been going on, and we're hoping to grow from those early steps that we've taken. Thank you.
We've been told that we're supposed to tell stories, so I'm going to tell you the story of the Dead Yeast Society, which is my research laboratory. And all of the achievements of the lab is basically attributable to my research students, so I thought it would be appropriate to show you who they are. So this is the most recent incarnation of the Dead Yeast Society. The Dead Yeast Society was founded 5 years ago when I arrived here at Providence College, and my research is basically involved in how yeast commit suicide. So all my students are simply killing yeast in interesting and novel ways. And so about 1 year into my time here, someone called themselves the Dead Yeast Society, and it stuck. And so basically, I have presently around 16 students from freshmen all the way up to seniors, and they spend pretty much all their time in the laboratory. And so what I would like to offer you is just an illustration of how one lab, this lab, the Dead Yeast Society, has been able to try to engage students and to bring students together. And for biology, it's an integral part of what we do. So there is the one monograph model in history and poli-sci, but we can't do it. It's really impossible to do biological research alone. And the second limitation for biological research, especially molecular biological research, is that it takes a long time for a student to acquire the necessary skills that he or she would need to produce data that is believable. And so what ends up happening is the challenge that we face in the biology department, in particular in my case in molecular biology, is how do you keep a student long enough so that you can train that student and give that student enough time to mature as a scientist so that by the end of the third or fourth year, he or she will be able to produce data that you can actually believe without going in there and repeating it yourself. And so the current model I have is one that Professor Longo was telling me is a sustained developmental cohort model. We simply call it the lab. And so what happens in the lab is we have a group of 16 students or so scattered throughout the 4 years at Providence College, and the whole lab is hierarchically structured so that the upperclassmen are pretty much mentoring the junior students. When I first did undergraduate research at the University of Pennsylvania, one of the difficult dimensions of my first semester doing research is that my PI was constantly looking over my shoulder. It was incredibly stressful. And so when I was asked to set up a research program here at PC, I decided that what I wanted to do was to give my students at least a semester free of their professor. And so what happens is a student comes in and a student is assigned to an upperclassman, and they're all named. So the guy down here next to our mascot. So everything is branded. So one of the things I had to figure out is a way to make the lab cool. So we have a name, we've got mascots, we got a logo designed by a student. Everything is set up to give them a particular group identity as well as an identity as individual junior research students. And so Kevin here, Kevin is a junior. He showed up in my lab in his freshman year. And during his freshman year in their Gen Bio lab, they had to do an experiment with bacteria. And he was particularly intrigued by these other bacteria that were on the plate. And so his lab instructor sent him to me in the second semester of his freshman year, and he decided that he wanted to figure out what these weird bacteria were doing. And I was very impressed by his initiative and just his curiosity. So I decided, hey, do you want to work in the lab? And so he started working in the lab, and he's now in charge as a junior of Team Murphy. And so we've got Team Murphy and Team Hurton, depending upon the upperclassman who is responsible for that team. And that upperclassman is responsible for the day-to-day experiments for his or her particular project. And the junior students are simply there to learn how to be part of a research team. And I tell my incoming students, I won't even talk to you if you don't want me to talk to you for the first semester. So you have a chance just to hang out, and we set it up so that they can hang out, so they have access to the lab basically between 7 in the morning and 11 o'clock at night. They asked for permission to set up surround sound, so we did that. We set up surround sound. They have access to the Albertus Magnus 137, which is a very large lecture hall with an incredible high-def TV, which is perfect for playing Wii. And so late at night, when they're doing research, they can go over there and play Wii with each other. And it's an attempt to try to bring them all together and to make research cool. And so, so basically you have these students, and they're there, they come in as freshmen or sophomore, and they pretty much choose to spend all the way until graduation and beyond as part of our team. Each of them pretty much has a research project. One of the things that I wanted to emphasize to them is I want them to become the world expert in one thing. And if it's programmed cell death and Saccharomyces cerevisiae and 22% ethanol at 30 degrees C, that's fine, but they are the world expert on that topic, and that is their project, and they will carry it through for 4 years. And they have opportunities basically to make presentations. So we start off going to local meetings where they learn how to make posters, they make poster presentations. So that's Matt Hurton, who at the end of his freshman year, the summer after his freshman year, was able to present some of his work at the Rhode Island Undergraduate Research Fellowship Conference down at URI. Eventually then they grow, they get promoted, and the goal, if they stay long enough, is I take them to an international meeting. So this year, 2 of my students who have done a significant amount of work are going to go to Canterbury, England with me the first week in May to attend the 9th International Yeast Apoptosis meeting. And so they get a full expense paid trip to England. We've been to Paris, so Paris was 2 years ago. And so it's the only way I can motivate them to go. And I want them to discover in a sense, the intrinsic joys of doing research and then being able to get up there in front of the field and talk about your work. And I keep telling them, look, you know better than this PhD student here because you've actually done the research. And so we do a lot of practice on speaking, how to make a PowerPoint presentation, how do you read journal articles. We do this all as a group. And we have picture taking every single semester, and there's an entire gallery online so that they know that they're part of a community. And the community extends to being after, so this is the alumni of the Dead Yeast Society, and they basically are doing PhDs, medical school, dental school. They're research technicians in Boston. And the idea is that we have a Facebook page, and so if they want to get in touch with one of the alumni to basically get a job. So right now we have several of my seniors are applying for jobs, for technician jobs in biology in Boston, and they are doing it through the network of the Dead Yeast Society. So Matt Goodwin, who graduated in 2008, is at Mass General Hospital, and he is actually the lab manager of the Jung lab, and he sent us an advance warning that they would have a free available technician position. And so a current senior has already sent in that information, and he was telling me today that the PI basically wants to see the transcript, and if the transcript goes well, he will be offered the position. So the idea is that the Dead Yeast Society extends beyond Providence College, and that this is a research endeavor, a research community that allows them to be part of a group that's doing research. And the goal, of course, is to publish papers. And so it takes a long time for us to publish a paper. So we're working on a manuscript now that has taken 3 years to accumulate all that data. And they are part of the writing of they write the manuscript. They go through the letter to the editor with me to make sure that they understand the nuances of the letter. And then the reviews came back 3 weeks ago, and they went through the reviews with me, and they said, all right, what do we need to do? And they're all in the lab basically finishing up the research that will be needed to resubmit the revision to the journal, because the journal is open to publishing our work. And so it's very much, a lot of people will sometimes ask me research versus teaching. For me, my entire experience here at Providence College has been both. It's been a great privilege to have this amazing group of students who are incredibly gung-ho. They're there all the time. And I can recognize who's in the lab by listening to the iTunes, the music that is wafting down the hallway at 11 o'clock at night. And it's just one way that we've been able to do it here. And for me, I think the difference has been that I've been forced by the necessity of being here to trust my students and to entrust them with the research program that I, as a biologist, have to do as a molecular biologist. And it's really been great fun. And I guess that's what it is, right? We have to tell our students that we're doing what we're doing because we enjoy it and we're passionate about it. And I keep telling them, they come in going to medical school and then they leave going to get a PhD. And I go, that's the goal. So I tell them they want to come in, they're like, I want to go to med school. I said, be careful, because if science gets you, you'll decide to get a PhD instead of an MD. And several of them have gone on to do that. And in many ways, I think for me as a biologist, that's the ultimate sign that the Dead Yeast Society is in fact very alive.
I guess we can take some questions. Why don't the audience go ahead and ask questions of me or any of your distinguished panelist colleagues? Anyone? Thoughts about undergraduate research? Yes? No, I agree. I think Margaret's idea was a good one too, in the sense of you're trying to inculcate research throughout the campus, and students model themselves after watching us as faculty exchange ideas and present and critique. One of the best ways I've taught my students research in a history course, a seminar, was to give them some of the raw examples that I got out of the archives. So a police report and a newspaper article and this kind of raw data, showed them the first draft. I kept a first draft of an article that I had submitted, and then showed them the criticisms I got from the journal. Okay, and it got rejected the first time. Okay, I had 3 long critiques of the article, and then showed them how I responded and rewrote the article, and finally how it got accepted and got published in the American Historical Review. But the first time around, I got it rejected. And so that process of discovery. So your idea is a good one, because they're going to see their faculty mentors, in a sense, arguing with each other, which is probably a good thing. Yes. I think interdisciplinary research, though, for students can be incredibly enriching. I mean, it may be more complex if they're hearing a paper by a faculty member who's in literature and there's a historian and a sociologist critiquing it and so on, but that can be a really invigorating experience for them. And again, we model how we would like our students to become active researchers and learners in that way by how we teach and do our own work. So I think it's incumbent on us in the disciplines to also introduce and make the point that this is a thought that came up, this historian got this idea from a political scientist or something. Do you have others' reactions to that?
Well, we have a senior this year. He's actually one of your students. And this kid, he's just amazing. But he's doing a senior thesis, and he's working with somebody from literature, Russell Hillier, and Richard Grace, who's a historian. And he's doing a research paper on Milton. So I think it's very possible to have faculty mentors from different departments who can help the student approach a topic from an interdisciplinary or a multidisciplinary approach.
So he's also part of my research lab. So,
Brilliant.
so the kid is doing English, history, and molecular biology. And basically, he was just intrigued by, well, he'd spent 3 years working in the lab, and he wanted to know, how do you do something like this in the other areas of his interest? And I said, go find professors who will want you to do it with you. And so he went off and looked for 2 professors, and he wanted to know whether or not he could do it in 2 departments. And I said, all you have to do is find a PI. And he found 2, and he's working on it now, and hopefully he will be able to publish something from the thesis that he's written.
I think actually they're planning on doing something. It's that good.
Over here.
I'd like to make a suggestion, is that we should be able to identify students who would be inclined to do research very early on. It's, again, a necessity in biology only because it takes so many years to get a student who is able to produce data that you can believe. And I have a great privilege of being one of the professors who teach the freshmen in Gen Bio 103, and so I'm able to meet students who I can actually talk to during their freshman year and encourage them. And I would hope that we as a faculty would take an active role in trying to identify students. And it's not necessarily the 4.0 student. I actually find that in my case in biology, you don't want the absolute best student, because the absolute best student is so busy being the very best student in the classroom that it's very hard for him or for her to engage in the labs and to make mistakes. So the question is, we should be able as a faculty to encourage our students to start talking about it. I think I've also noticed, and I think my colleagues in biology would notice too, is that as more and more students are doing research, it becomes part of the talk. And so students are beginning to ask each other how they can go and do research. And it's part of this cultural change, I think, that the college is actually witnessing as we speak.
I think you've modeled it to some degree already by the amount of interdisciplinary cooperation you have in some parts of your curriculum. I think that makes a good statement too. Maybe moving forward you could think about some other ways. I know where that could happen. I know a lot of our most exciting undergraduate research happens in international relations and environmental studies, and those are interdisciplinary programs that have team-taught introductory courses. So international relations will have a historian, a political scientist, and an economist. Environmental science will have a biologist and a sociologist. And those have been really good things to encourage that with students. Yep.
I was just going to say, similar to what Father Nick had to say, we had Mike O'Neill, who's the person who's trying to develop undergraduates applying for more of the prestigious grants and awards. He came to our department, and one of the things we're trying to do with our new Gateway course is identify those students earlier to get them to do senior research projects, but also that they should apply for Marshall grants, that they should apply for a Fulbright scholarship, and some of the other scholarships. And you need to do research in order to be able to apply for those grants. And I just had one other suggestion. I know that there is a floating around a proposal to create a Center for Interdisciplinary Studies on campus that would bring all of the interdisciplinary programs in some way, shape, or form together and provide some coordination. And I think coordinating interdisciplinary research would be probably an essential component of any such center should it get off the ground. I'm sorry, I would disagree with you. I think there's been a real sea change in terms of, I've been here 16 years, and from the time when I first arrived, there's been just a sea change in terms of how faculty and programs and departments approach teaching, and there's dynamic new faculty that are discussion-based and student-centered. There's really innovative ways in which technology has been integrated into our teaching. We have all of these cross-disciplinary programs that are doing really innovative things. So I agree that there's still a lot of traditional approaches, but I would disagree respectfully that we're still all doing 19th century models.
I'd like to respond to that. I mean, I am part of a seminar with Professor Longo and a couple of other colleagues here where we're discussing engaged student learning. And one of the things that I've discovered, it's been an incredible experience of collaboration and really having a chance to discover new things about my colleagues and how they teach, is that different fields approach learning in different ways. So for example, it would be very hard for me to ask my student in the freshman bio, what do you want to learn? I mean, there's basically in the sciences, I need to make sure my student learns X amount of information. It will take several years of intense pedagogy to get my student to the point where he or she is able to really be open and able to even ask the correct questions with the type of techniques that he or she would need to know to answer them. But I know Professor Longo, for example, has made me see that in certain fields, the co-creation and generation of knowledge, especially if the knowledge is based on experience as a human being, those sort of fields are much more amenable to the type of pedagogical approach that you are proposing. So I mean, I think that the great thing that I've seen in this seminar with my colleagues is that different fields do it in different ways, and depending upon the nature of the field and what has to be learned in order for that student to achieve a certain level of competency and proficiency so that he and she can become an independent scholar. And I'm focusing on students. My thing I've learned here is we need to get our students to recruit other students. It's not, one of the big things, I don't go out recruiting anymore because students tell me, they talk to other students. It would be great if we had students doing research talking at Civ, where you have one day in Civ every semester where you have undergraduate, upperclassmen coming in and talking to their peers in Civ about the different research projects that they've done. I think so many of our students just don't even know that that option is available to them. And in our freshman class, our department has decided that one of the things they're required to do is they're required to go to the undergraduate research poster session. Every bio major has to go as a freshman so that he or she can encounter other bio majors who are doing research. And then it actually goes, oh my God, I can actually do something like this. And I think the college has to do this on a wider basis. We need to have our younger students encountering older students who are doing research so they get the bug.
I would also add, I think this gets to Steve's question. I actually think, at least since I've been here, Providence College is really good at creating opportunities for interdisciplinary learning. And I think that's the premise of the Global Studies program is, we can't solve the problems of the 21st century with any one single disciplinary way of thinking. So the faculty seminar that we're a part of, but then like the course you taught last semester with Eric Sung, photography and marketing. This semester I'm teaching a course with photography and public service. So really building opportunities for faculty to model the kind of integrative learning that we want to see students do. So I think more and more the Center for Teaching Excellence is doing a great job at building those opportunities. But and the 3 years that I've been here, there have been a lot of opportunities for that.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I'd agree. All the money that we've gotten from Mellon Foundation too, everyone has had to been interdisciplinary, and they want to make grantors want to find out that whatever money they give is going to have a maximal impact. I knew him very well. I think we'll always have room for the craggy individual. Mark Roche was the long time, very successful Dean of Arts and Sciences at Notre Dame, said a dean is a conductor of an orchestra made up entirely of composers. And Hugh probably could identify with that. So I think we'll have a lot of room for the craggy individuals. I think structures do change slowly. Speaking to your point, when we decided as academe in the early 20th century to connect disciplinary lines to budget, that was a decisive change, all right? And that has haunted us ever since. The disciplines that we created about 1910 are budgetary lines now, or tenure lines, and that's, but I think there are ways, I mean, as a dean, I've very much encouraged program directors of interdisciplinary programs, they can also ask for new positions. They also comment on tenure. Tenure is only in departments, but they play a very important role for us connecting disciplinary lines. So change comes slowly, but I do think I think it can come, and I think it comes by encouraging interdisciplinarity in a really rich way. And just I would, on the graduate education issue, I do think this is what we've been talking about is something different than graduate education light. And in fact, in many ways, it has been undergraduate institutions like Providence and predominantly undergraduate institutions like William & Mary. This started with College of Worcester, was really one of the key pioneers here. I think we really do it better than large research universities. And I think it is a challenge for them to actually, because the danger is that it's graduate education just writ small, and it doesn't work as effectively. You have anyone there have comments on that too?
I can address the graduate. So my education was primarily at R01 institutions. These are the large research institutions. I did my undergraduate education at Penn, and then my PhD at MIT. And so when I came here, when I was sent here to serve in the biology department, I had never encountered a liberal arts education before. And it's interesting because Dr. Dragula and I have been talking about how our experiences in our education has really shaped the way that we teach our own classes. So in my case, all my classes were 800 students or so, and we were not required to go to class at all. And there were some classes I never went to class at all. I just studied on my own and took the exams. And for him, in his experience, his education was pretty much small classes, one-on-one mentorship with. And so when I came here, it was a completely different way of learning. And what I've discovered is what I do here has no parallels in a graduate education, because in a graduate program in biology, it is centered primarily on the graduate students and the postdoctoral fellows who are actually doing the research. And they come in and they basically, so one very key difference is a graduate student doesn't have an expiration date. He or she has to get it done at some point. My students will be out of here in 4 years. I have to get something done and productive out of them in 4 years. And number one. Number two, it's just the very nature of the beast is my PI at MIT didn't do experiments. I have, by the very nature of doing research with undergrads, have to be doing experiments side by side with them all the time because I'm doing the problem solving that's required that they don't have the experience for. In a graduate school, they would simply go to another graduate student, a senior graduate student, or a postdoctoral fellow. And so here, the mentorship, I think, is much more personal. I have to be engaged in their lives. Another difference is I have never done research while talking about the brothers Karamazov. And here at PC, that happens all the time. During the summer, my students are reading Brothers Karamazov or War and Peace, and we're running gels and discussing War and Peace. And that would never happen. Certainly didn't happen at Penn, doesn't happen at all at MIT. And I think it's something unique about our education that we provide our students, that we can engage these ideas outside biology with biology majors while doing research in the bench.
You know, I think you've been a very, very patient audience. There's probably lots of other comments that we'd like to exchange. Chuck, maybe we should bring the large gathering to a close and just have small conversations if people stick around. Thank you very much, and thank you for your comments. Okay.
Thank you very much. I want to visit your lab.
Oh, come. I would love
These
you to come.
devotees that
I
used to
love it.
come.
I want to just take a couple of minutes with a few announcements. First of all, this event took a lot of work, and I want to thank some people who helped to pull it off. In the back of the room, we have Tara Heineman, our grad assistant, who's been working on the project, who worked tirelessly behind the scenes. So everything, I said we probably would have had this outside if I were just doing this myself. And Tara did a great job, but also Susan Hanoyan from the CTE, Lori Group CTE as well, and Siobhan Ross spent a lot of time working on it as well, and so I thank them, and several members of our committee also. And then certainly our panelists, terrific job. I sent them an email a few weeks ago, said, you got 7 minutes, but I really need you, here, and they all put together their presentations and then ready to respond to the questions. I appreciate your efforts. I think it provided a nice opportunity for dialogue and conversation among the group. And to thank Dr. Strikwerda as well for coming here. I was a little nervous when you announced, when you told me that you were going to be president, that you had a new job coming in a few months. I said, well, when he wrote that, I said, I hope he's not changing his mind because he's so busy and he's got this new job. But he's, sure enough, made the trip here and really appreciate you coming to join us tonight and to speak and to share your experiences with us. That's terrific. We have some events and other opportunities coming up over the next few months that I wanted to share with you, and you have some of this on the back of your of the program that was provided at your tables. We're going to have our second annual celebration of student scholarship and creativity next month on Wednesday, April 13th. So please consider attending. Please consider reminding your students and faculty colleagues. We'd love to have a great turnout there for that event, and we hope to continue to build this again each year. We also have our final round of mini grants for those of you who are interested in pursuing a potential mini grant project either within your discipline or interdisciplinary and involving various colleagues, and so there's some more information on the back regarding that as well. In the fall, we are planning to continue this series. We had an event in each semester this year. We're planning to do something in the fall. We don't have final details yet, but we'll get the word out. If you enjoyed yourself tonight, we certainly want you to share this with your colleagues who are not here. We'd love to fill the room. So we appreciate that. There will be an evaluation, I believe, that's coming out soon, and so please provide us with your feedback in that way as well. And otherwise, thank you all for coming. It's been terrific, and we're glad to have such great audience participation as well, and I know we'll be here for a few minutes afterwards if you'd like to have further conversation. So thanks again. Appreciate it.